السلام عليكم يا جماعة. أنا دكتورة ياسمين طارق، هشرح لكم دلوقتي في البرزنتيشن دي أول محاضرتين على الويب سايت في مادة Finance and Financial Management. أول topic إحنا هنتكلم عنه. The first topic we are going to talk about is the cost of capital. What is the cost of capital? The cost of capital deals with identifying the cost of each of capital components. What are the capital components? Are the types of capital used by firms to raise funds, which means the funds or the resources required by any firm is determined from each capital component. We have two main sources of capital. The first is debt and the second is equity. That means borrowing money, for example, taking a loan from a bank. Equity means using your own investment, either it's common stock, preferred stock, or returned earning. يبقى احنا يا جماعة الكوست اوف كابيتال ده معناه تكلفة التمويل. تكلفة التمويل يعني انا عايز اشوف الموارد اللي انا عايزها او اللي انا عايز استخدمها في الشركة هجيبها منين، ايه المصادر اللي انا هجيب منها الكابيتال بتاعي. انا عندي مصدرين رئيسيين. المصدر الاساسي، المصدر الاولاني المديونية او اللي هو الدين، زي مثلا ان انا اخد قرض من بنك، والمصدر الثاني اللي هي الملكية أو الاستثمارات الخاصة، سواء كانت أسهم عادية، أسهم ممتازة، أرباح محتجزة. فأنا I'm supposed to determine the sources of capital by each company or by each needed by each project, and determine the cost of each component or of each source, and then determine the weighted average cost of capital, which is the cost of each capital component multiplied by its own weight in the capital structure or in the optimal capital structure, which is the best or the better combination between all sources of capital in order to raise the value of the firm stock price. Here is the first example. Our first example shows a company that estimates that it can issue debt at before tax cost of 9%. All of us know that borrowing or taking a loan from a bank will cost us the interest rate of this loan, because we are going to repay back the loan as a principal plus its interest. كلنا عارفين ان احنا لما هناخد قرض من البنك هنستلف فلوس، احنا بنرجع القرض زائد الفايدة. اذا تكلفة الدين علينا او تكلفة القرض ده هي الفايدة اللي بيفرضها علينا الجهة اللي احنا واخدين منها اللون او الديت ده. Its tax rate is 25%. The company also can issue preferred stock at $100 per share, which pays a constant dividend of $8.5 per year. يعني معنى كده أنا عندي this means that the company have preferred stock, the price per share $100 the dividend per year $8.5. The company's stock currently sells at $33 per share. The year-end dividend D1 is expected to be $3.5, and the dividend is expected to grow at a constant rate of 7%. The company's capital structure consists of 80% common stock, 10% debt, and 10% preferred stock, which means the total of this capital structure must be equal to 180 plus 10 plus 10 means 100, which is the total capital of this firm. The two requirements. The first one, what is the cost of each capital component, and what is the WACC, which is the abbreviation of weighted average cost of capital. In order to determine the value of WACC, you must calculate the cost of each capital component. So in other exercises, if he told you or asked you to calculate the WACC only, this means that you have first to calculate the cost of each capital component. In the previous exercise, we have three main sources of capital: cost of common stock, cost of preferred stock, and cost of debt. The cost of common stock is calculated by this rule: RS equal D1, which is the dividend on each share of the common stock, and P is the price of each common stock, plus G, which is the constant rate of growth for the price of this common stock, the constant rate of growth. RS equal 3.5 because the dividends on each share of the common stock is 3.5 and the price for each share is 33 and the growth rate is 7%, which means that the cost of common stock will be equal to 17.6. The cost of preferred stock is calculated by this rule, RP equal DP, which is the dividends on each share of preferred stock, over the price of each share of preferred stock. The dividend was 8.5 and the price 100, which means that RP, or the cost of preferred stock, is 8.5%. The cost of debt equal, now is RD I(1) minus T. I is the interest rate on the debt. T is the tax rate. Here in our exercise, the tax rate is 25% and the interest rate is 9%, which means that the cost of debt equal to 6.75%. The second requirement, which is the WACC, or the weighted average cost of capital, is WD times RD plus WP plus times RP plus WC times RS. WD means the weight of debt. WP the weight of preferred stock. WC is the weight of common stock, which means the percentage that the common stock is going to share in the total capital structure. Here in our exercise, common stock has 80%, preferred stock 10%, and debt 10%, which means we are going to calculate the weight of debt, which is 10%, times the cost of debt here, which is 6.75%, plus the 10% as a weight for preferred stock, and its cost is 8.5%, which was calculated in the previous slide, plus the 80% of the common stock times its cost, which is 17.6%, which means that the total will be 15.6%, which means that the weighted average cost of capital of this for this company is 15.6%. Exercise 2 is going to show you company LEI has the following capital structure, which consists of 30% debt, yani 30% of the capital will be for debt, 15% of the capital preferred stock, 55% of the capital will be for common stock. And then LEI's expected net income this year is 43,285.72. This number, he put this number in the exercise to confusing you. You are not going to use this number because what you are looking for here are to determine what are the main sources of capital in order to be able to determine the cost of each source of capital. Here you have how many sources? You have here preferred stock, debt can be sold at an interest rate 10%, preferred stock, new preferred stock with a dividend of $12, which means that the dividends on preferred stock is $12 per share, and the price per share is $100 per share. Here, LEI paid a dividend of $4.6 per share last year, and we have to underline the word last year. And its stock currently sells for $54 per share. LEI can obtain new capital in the following ways, which means here in the exercise in front of us, we have three main sources of capital: the common stock, the preferred stock, and the debt. But here in our exercise, the common stock had dividend 4.6 per share last year, which means that we have to calculate the value of the dividends for the current year. The dividend grew at a constant rate of 8% in the future, which means in order to determine the value of the dividends in the future, you have to multiply the 4.6 times 1 plus L growth rate, 1 plus a growth rate in order to be able to determine the value of the dividend in the current year. يعني يا أولاد هو هنا قايل لك إن الديفيدند على الكومن ستوك 4.6 per share last year. last year يبقى أنا لازم أحسب بتاعة السنة دي. هحسب بتاعة السنة دي إزاي؟ هعملها times 1 plus الجروث rate. 1 plus الجروث rate. ليه؟ For example, suppose that your salary is 1,000 pounds last year and you are going to increase by 10%. This means that your salary this year will be 1,000 plus 10% of the 1,000, which is 1,100. This is the same things. At the end, this table shows you projects from 1 to 5, the cost of the project, and the rate of return, the expected rate of return for each of these two projects. You have to ignore this column because you are not going to use the cost, but you are going to look for the expected rate of return. The solution will be calculating the cost of each capital component. The first component here is the common stock. We are going to multiply the dividend by 1 plus the growth rate because I told you from the previous slide that the dividend given for you was for the last year. So I have to calculate the dividend for the current year. زي ما قلت لكم الديفيدند اللي هي بتاعت السنة اللي فاتت لازم أحسب الديفيدند بتاعت السنة دي فهضربها في 1 زائد المعدل النمو الجروث ريت واقسمها على البرايس بلس الجروث ريت عادي هطبق الرول عادي جدا. So the common stock cost will be the 4.6 times 1.08 over 54 plus the growth rate will give me 17.2. And the cost of preferred stock will be equal to the dividend, which is 12 over 100 will give me 12%. And the cost of debt will be the 10%, which is the interest rate times 1 minus t. The tax rate is 30%, which means 1 minus t equal to 70%. So the cost of debt will be equal to 7. Then to calculate the weighted average cost of capital, I will multiply the weight of each capital component given in the previous exercise times its cost. The weight of debt was 30% times 7% the cost. The weight of preferred stock was 15% times 12%, which is the cost of preferred stock. The weight of common stock was 55% times the cost of common stock, which is 17.2%. It will give me 13.36%. If I look in the table in the previous slide, I will find that the expected rate of return, all of the expected rate of return are higher than the cost of capital, which is 13.36, except project E. It's 12%, which means I'm going to accept project A and B and C and D because they are going to give me expected rate of return higher than the cost. And I'm going to reject project E because its expected rate of return is lower than the cost. باي لوجيك كده أنا مش هينفع أقبل مشروع هيديني معدل عائد متوقع يكون أقل من التكلفة اللي أنا هتحملها لأن أنا كده هخسر. فلازم المعدل العائد يبقى العائد المتوقع يكون أكتر من الكوست اوف كابيتال اللي أنا حسبته. This is similar exercise, but here in this exercise, Midwest Electric Company uses only debt and common equity, which means here there is no preferred stock. So that the capital structure will be formed from only two components, the debt 45% its weight and the equity 55% its weight. The cost of common stock will be $2. Its expected constant rate is 4%. But here the dividend is its last dividend, which means I am going to multiply the 2 by 1 plus the interest rate, the growth rate, which is the 4%. And the common stock price for each share is $20 per share. The required here is to calculate the cost of common stock, the WACC, the weighted average cost of capital, and which project should Midwest accept. He asked asked me here about two projects. Project A has rate of return 13% and project B has rate of return 10%. The solution will be the cost of common stock, which is the dividend of the previous year, times 1 plus G, as I have discussed before in the previous example, over the price plus the growth rate. It will give me 14.4%, and the cost of debt, the interest rate times 1 minus tax, will give me 6%. The weighted average cost of capital will be the weight of each capital component, which is 45% for debt times its cost, 6%, and 55% for common stock times its cost, 14.4%, will give me 10.62%. That's why MEC should accept the project A because it gives a rate of return 13% and reject the project B because it gives only 10%, which is lower than the 10.62. يعني هتقبل إيه؟ لأنه أعلى من ال 10.62 هو 13%، وهترفض B لأنه أقل من ال 10.62%. This is another type of exercises. He gives you here balance sheet, simplified balance sheet, and the required is to calculate the weighted average cost of capital in case that the company wants to make a financial expansion for its investment of rate 25%, which means it needs to increase its investment by 25%. يعني الشركة عايزة تزود استثماراتها ب 25%. طب هي حجم استثماراتها ده عبارة عن ايه؟ عبارة عن 20 مليون باوندز اللي هم التوتال assets. يعني هم عايزين ال 20 مليون باوندز دول يبقوا 25 million pounds. 25 million pounds. He gives you here some data about the company, which we are going to use in the solution. Returned earning 1.5 million. The new preferred stock can be sold at 30 pounds, and its issuance expense is 1 pound per stock, and the dividend is 4 pounds per stock. Common stock can be sold with issuance expense 2% from the value of the stock. The required rate of return is 18%. In order to solve this exercise, you have to follow 4 steps. It begins by calculating the value of the additional investment, which is the value of the investment times expansion rate, 25% times 20 million will give you 5 million. يعني احنا عشان نحسب حجم التوسع اللي هو عايز يعمله هنضرب النسبة اللي هو عايز يزودها في حجم الاستثمارات الحالي اللي هو اللي اوريدي موجود، الحجم اللي عنده اللي هو 20 مليون. Then the second step is calculating the percentage of each capital component in the capital structure. In other words, to determine the weight of each capital component. يعني أنا عشان أعرف هو هنا the difference between this exercise and the previous one, that he didn't give you the combination of the capital structure. You are going to calculate the percentage of each component of the capital structure, which will be equal to the value of finance of each source over the total value of finance. The percentage of preferred stock, if you look in the balance sheet, it will be 2 million over the total, which is 20, means it represents 10%. And the percentage of owner's equity equal to 13 over 20 million, which means it represents 65% of the capital. But this owner's equity is divided to returned earning and common stock. The value of the returned earning is already given, which is 1.5 million pounds. So I am going to divide the 1.5 million pound over the 5 million, which is the value of the expansion or the needed value to be expanded in the investment. It will give me 30%, which means 30% out of those 65 are for returned earning, and the remaining will be 35%, which is for common stock. The percentage of debt will be from the balance sheet, the loans 5 divided 20, it will be equal to 25%. So the 4 ratios for the 4 components which form the capital structure are 10% preferred stock, 30% for returned earnings, 35% for common stock, and 25% for debt. The third step is to calculate the cost of each capital component, exactly like the previous exercises. You are going to calculate the cost of returned earning is already given, which is the required rate of return, which is equal to 18%. ده أصلا عندك هو مديهولك given اللي هو العائد المطلوب 18%. The cost of common stock will be equal to the required rate of return divided 100 minus the issuance cost. The issuance cost for common stock, he told you that it's 2%, which means the cost of common stock will be 18.35. يبقى cost of returned earning 18. The cost of common stock 18.35. In this exercise, the givens are different than the givens in the other exercises. That's why we use these ratios in calculating the cost of common stock. The cost of preferred stock, cash dividend of preferred stock after tax, RP equal dividend over price equal 4 over 30, which is the price of the preferred stock minus the issuance cost, which is £1, which means 4 over 29 equal 13.8%. The cost of debt will be the interest, which is given as 12% times 1 minus the tax rate, which is 22% equal 9.36. And I'm going to calculate the fourth step, which is calculating the weighted average cost of capital, which is the weight of each capital component times its cost. We have here 4 capital components: the debt, the common stock, the preferred stock, and the returned earning. We are going to multiply each weight from the previous slide we have calculated times each cost to give us the weighted average cost of capital 15.55%. يعني خدنا من السلايد اللي قبل دي الويت بتاع كل كابيتال كومبوننت، الحجم بتاعه في الكابيتال ستراكشر، النسبه بتاعته 25%، ال 15، ال 35، ال 30، وضربناها في الكوست اللي احنا حسبناه لكل كابيتال كومبوننت. This exercise is very similar to the previous one. It's the same requirement, which is to calculate the weighted average cost of capital, but there are some differences in the given. Here is the first one, which is related to the current dividends in the fourth line in the required. Current dividend is 5.5 per share and the expected dividend is £6 per share, which means that he didn't give you the growth rate, so you have to calculate the growth rate by subtracting 6 minus 5.5 over 5.5 in order to know the rate of increase. يعني هنا هو مش مديك معدل النمو بتاع الديفيدنس في الكومن ستوك، مديك 5.5 للسنة للسنة دي والسنة المتوقعة 6، يبقى أنا هعمل هشيل الحالي هطرحه من المتوقع واقسمه على الحالي علشان اقدر اعرف الجروث ريت بتاعتي قد ايه وابتدي اشتغل عادي خالص. عندي هنا returned earnings 0.6 million يعني which means 600,000 pounds. The investment rate 20% will investment 25, which means that the volume of expansion will be 20% of 25, which will be equal to 5 million also, and you are going to continue using the same rules as the previous exercise. Here we are going to talk about capital budgeting techniques. What's the meaning of capital budgeting? Capital budgeting is the process of planning expenditures on assets whose cash flows are expected to extend beyond 1 year. The overall objective of capital budgeting is to maximize the profitability, because if the firm have more than one alternative, how to choose among those alternatives? The ways or the techniques we are going to explain in the following slide is the net present value and the payback period, the discounted payback period. This exercise shows me you must analyze 2 projects, Project X and Project Y. Each project costs $10,000 and the firm's WACC, or the weighted average cost of capital, is 12%. The expected net cash flows are as the following, starting from year 0, which is the year of the beginning, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. You need to know which one to choose. The requirement number 1, to calculate each project's net present value, payback period, and discounted payback period. Which projects should be accepted if they are independent, and which projects should be accepted if they are mutually exclusive. We are going to start by the net present value technique. What's the meaning of the net present value technique? Here we are going to calculate the net present value for both projects in the previous slide. The present value must be equal to the present value of the expected future cash flows, and subtracted from the cost, the current cost I'm going to pay to start this project. I can't make a comparison between a future value and a present value. That's why I have to calculate the present value of the expected cash flows, because the cost is considered as a present value, but the expected cash flows are considered as a future value. يعني أنا لازم ما ينفعش أقارن ما بين present value و future value، بما إن ال expected cash flows دي حاجة في الفيوتشر فهي future value، فعشان أقدر أقارنها بالكوست اللي أنا هدفعه دلوقتي لازم أحسب لها ال present value. فهنلاقي عندنا النت present value of project X negative $10,000. Negative $10,000. Why I put here a negative? Because it is a cost, plus the future expected flows from year 1 to year 4. It will be in the first year $6,500 over 1 plus the cost, which is the weighted average cost of capital, the 12% to the power 1 in year 1, to the power 2 in year 2, and so on. And the same step in project Y. We will find that the net present value here 966 in project X and 630 in project Y. Which one to choose? As long as the net present value equal to a value which is higher than 0, this means that I can accept this project because the outcome which I'm expecting to receive is higher than the cost that I am going to pay. العائد اللي أنا متوقع أو الفلوس اللي متوقع تجيلي منه أكتر من التكلفة، فطالما القيمة بتاعته أعلى من 0 يبقى معنى كده إن هو بالنسبة لي هيكون مقبول. طب in this case we have two values which are positive. Which one to choose? هنا الاثنين positive، الاثنين أكتر من 0. أنهي واحدة هختار؟ If the projects are mutually exclusive, and mutually exclusive means that if one project is taken on, the other must be rejected. I can accept only one project. In this case, I am going to accept project X because it has the higher value. So I'm going to accept the project X. But in case that both projects are independent projects. Independent projects are projects whose cash flows are not affected by the acceptance or non-acceptance of other projects, which means if both of them have positive net present value, so I am free to choose both of them. If project Y have a negative value, I am going to reject it. And if it have a lower value than project X, I am going to accept it in case it's independent project, and reject it in case it is mutually exclusive, because in case of mutually exclusive I have only to choose one project. يعني في mutually exclusive أنا هختار واحد بس، لكن في الاندبندنت أنا ممكن أختار ده أو ده، فلو الاثنين positive أنا ممكن أختار الاثنين. The payback period. What's the meaning of the payback period? The payback period is the length of time required for an investment's net revenues to cover its cost, which means that after how long time I'm going to get my money back, or the cost I paid back, after how long in this project. I have in this project these two projects from year 1 to year 4. So I'm going to calculate the cumulative cash flows. Of course, from the point of view of this concept, the shorter the period, the better the project. يعني الوقت اللي هيترجع لي فلوسي أسرع ده معناه إن ده أفضل من وجهة نظر الكونسبت ده، من وجهة نظر الكونسبت ده. فأنا عندي هنا negative 10,000 which is between brackets here between brackets means negative. For project X, negative 10,000, and the expected cash flows for the first year is 6,500, and this is clear from the slide of the exercise. So I'm going to add negative 10,000 plus 6,500. It will give me negative 3,500. يعني أنا هاخد ال10 الكوست دي هجمعها على الاكسبكتد فلو بتاع السنة الأولانية اللي هو 6,500، يبقى نيجاتيف 10 بلس 6,500 هيديني نيجاتيف 3,500. طيب الاكسبكتد cash flow of year 2 is 3,000. I'm going to add the negative 3,500 plus 3. It will give me negative 500. وهجمع ال negative 3,500 plus التلاتة اللي أنا I'm expecting to receive in year 2 will give me negative 500. ال negative 500 plus ال positive 3,000 in year 3 will be equal to 2,500. Negative 500 plus 3,000 will give me positive 2,500 plus 1,000 at the last year. It will give me 3,500. Again, I'm going to add from the beginning the negative 10,000, which is the cost. Negative 10,000 plus 6,500, which is the expected cash flows in year 1 for project X. Negative 10 plus 6.5 will give me negative 3.5. Negative 3.5 plus 3, which is the expected flow for year 2, will give me negative 500. Negative 500 plus 3,000 in year 3 will give me 2,500 in positive, plus 1,000 at year 4 will give me 3,500, which means أنا هاخد النيجاتيف واجمعه على البوزيتيف اللي أنا متوقعاه في السنة الأولانية، لأن النيجاتيف أكتر هيديني نيجاتيف، وفي السنة اللي بعديها نيجاتيف 3.5 وفي بوزيتيف 3، يبقى اللي فاضل عندي هيبقى نيجاتيف برضه. هيبتدي يتحول من نيجاتيف لبوزيتيف في السنة الثالثة، يبقى أنا آخر قيمة نيجاتيف the last negative value was at year 2. The last negative value, which is negative 500, was at year 2, which means the payback period for project X will be equal to 2. From where I got this 2? This 2 is at the year at which we have the last negative value, 2, plus the last negative value, which is 500, over the previous positive value, which is the 3,000 in year 3. And this is clear in the numbers in the slide of the exercise. So the result will be 2.17 years, which means I am going to cover my cost in project X after 2.17 years. The same steps we are going to do in project Y. We will find that the last negative value, which is the negative 3,000 at year 2, plus the last negative value 3,000 over 3,500, it will give me 2.86 years, which means from the point of view of the concept of the payback period, project X is better than project Y because I'm going to receive my money in a shorter time than project X. Here we are going to calculate the discounted payback period. What's the discounted payback period? The discounted payback period where cash flows are first discounted at the WACC, which is the weighted average cost of capital, and then used to find the payback year. Which means I'm going to calculate the net present value for each, or the present value for each expected cash flow, which means I'm going to divide this cash flow over 1 plus the WACC, which is R, to the power T. We can use here the numbers we have calculated in the net present value. Yani here in the first row, we put the cash flows starting from year 0, which is cost negative 10,000, 6,500, and so on, like the exercise. And then we are going to write the values we calculated before in the net present value, which is the value of the expected cash flow divided by 1 plus WACC, which is the 12% to the power T. We are going to find for year 1 this value, for year 2 this value, for year 3 this value, and so on. And then we are going to calculate the cumulative discounted cash flows but by the same way like the previous slide. We are going to deal with the second row only. We are going to neglect the first row. يعني we are going to deal with the discounted cash flow row, which means negative 10,000 plus this value will give me negative 4,196. This value, negative 4,196 plus 2,391 will give me this value, and so on. And then I'm going to calculate the discounted payback period. In the same way, the last negative value is at year 2, which is this. The last negative value, which is negative 1,804, over the next positive value, which is 2135.34, will give me 2.85 years. يعني أنا هنا هعمل إيه؟ أنا هبتدي أحسب النت بريزنت فاليو أو البريزنت فاليو بتاعت كل تدفق نقدي متوقع، وده ممكن أجيبه من الأرقام اللي أنا حسبتها أصلا في الخطوة بتاعت النت بريزنت فاليو. مش أنا حسبتها فراكشن واحد هاخدهم أنقلهم في الصف التاني اللي هو بتاع الديسكاونتد كاش فلوز، وهبتدي أتعامل مع المسألة بالظبط زي الباي باك بيريود العادية، بس أنا هستخدم الصف التاني. يعني هتعامل معها بنفس الطريقة. هاخد النيجاتيف 10,000 بلس البوزيتيف كاش فلو اللي بعديها هيديني القيمه النيجاتيف دي، هاخد القيمه دي اجمعها على اللي بعديها وهكذا. ليه؟ لان القيمه النيجاتيف دي معناها ان ده اللي فاضل لسه ما اتغطاش. يعني انا ابتديت ب10 هيجي لي 5,800 ففاضل 490 وهكذا لحد ما بحلها بنفس الطريقه اللي هي هتبقى 2 آخر the last negative value at year 2 plus the last negative value over the next positive value. In the same way, I'm going to calculate the discounted payback period for project Y. It will be 3.72, which means from the point of view of the discounted payback period, I'm going to choose project X because it is shorter.